Good afternoon. Welcome back to Homeland Security Policy and Practice. Our topic this week is border security, and we're also going to be talking a little bit about immigration policy here in the United States. These are two really hot button issues and have been for the past decade or so, and probably will continue to be so for a lot of years going forward. And a lot of that stems from the fact that it is not a simple issue. You can't, most people can't really define easily what their stance is on border control and security there. So, and anyone who tells you it's a simple problem to solve doesn't know what they're talking about, and that includes pundits and politicians. So there's a lot of information in the slide deck on how we secure our borders, some of the methods we've adopted in the past 10 years, and there's a few slides on immigration. And even that, though, it gives a lot of good facts and figures, and you're going to want to know those. It doesn't really capture the enormity of the entire concept of border security. The first thing I want to talk about, you can't separate the two issues. Okay, border control, how people get into the United States and who gets to stay, and immigration are linked. Okay, you can't talk about one really without the other. And when we say immigration, we're talking about people who are coming here to the United States to live permanently, not those who are on student visas or work visas or a variety of other programs, but those who are immigrating to the United States permanently and intend to become lawful permanent residents or citizens of the United States. So we'll talk about in the slides, and maybe briefly here on this video, we'll talk about the three paths to lawful immigration. But we're going to focus a lot on the border. And, you know, there's a lot of simplistic type of solutions to border security. Fences, gates, armed guards, a variety of things keep everybody out. The reality is the border is much more complicated than that, and you depend on the border operating effectively more than you think. Everything that you buy, for the most part, of a material good, has to cross that border. And if the border is too secure, is not able to pass goods efficiently, you will end up paying more for all of these materials that you purchase. I want you to think about this statistic when we talk about immigration. 1 in 5 Floridians is foreign born, was not born here in the United States. 1 in 5. Before we can really grasp the importance of immigration to the United States, we need to understand a little bit about economics. And some of you might know these terms already and some don't, so we're going to cover them real quick. Gross domestic product is basically all of the economic drivers in a geographic area. And we're talking specifically about the gross domestic product of Florida, but you can also talk about GDP of a nation. And basically it's the total of all goods and services that are created or produced in that state or in that nation. There are 5 main factors, and there's 5 main factors for our discussion. There are several different formulas for this. The 5 main factors that go into GDP, C, I, G, and X, and then M. So C is consumer spending. Every time you go out and purchase anything, clothes, shoes, car, washer and dryer, microwave, whatever, you are contributing to the gross domestic product of your state and of the nation. I is investment, primarily from the corporate sector, investment that they're putting back into their businesses to make their businesses better. G, okay, is government spending on goods and services, not government spending on salary or programs or things like that, on services or goods they purchase from the private sector. And that G component is how stimulus works. If the government spends more money on goods and services, the gross domestic product goes up. So that's how that works. And then we have X and M, which is imports and exports. Clearly you want more exports and imports. You want that to be a positive number. But that's the main factors. So set that aside. The gross domestic product in fiscal year 2011 in Florida was $754 billion. Okay. Now go back to the first slides where we talk about 1 in 5 Floridians is foreign born. Okay. So 1 in 5, 20% of Floridians are foreign born, which means we can boil this down to this: 20% of Florida's gross domestic product, or 92 billion, is attributed to foreign born individuals living here in Florida. And we've taken out tourism and a bunch of other things. You need to look through the slides there. But we're talking about $92 billion every year, give or take some. That's a lot of money. Okay, so immigration is important. We can't just turn it off. Okay, there needs to be a path of legal immigration. Now, I'm not talking about the illegal immigration that has become such a ridiculous issue in politics recently, because it is really, in reality, a very small issue. But we're talking about there needs to be a path for people to come to the country and basically spend money. Okay, because your economy depends upon it, my economy depends upon it. Then let's look at border security. Everyone seems to say that, we can just lock the borders down. But as I may have mentioned before, just about every good that you purchase at Walmart or Target comes across that border. Okay, we don't manufacture much here in the United States anymore. We import a great deal of our material goods, which means that border has to be able to effectively pass goods from other countries into this country so that you can purchase it. And if we create delays in these borders, if we make an inefficient, over-secure border, and there is such a thing as an overly secure border, then that's going to drive up costs for you. Everything that manufacturers and shipping companies have to pay will get passed on to you. So very few people want to pay twice as much as they do already for a flat screen television. So the border, the key here is it needs to be secure, but it also needs to be effective. It needs to do its job, which is to let goods and materials through that need to come through, let people through that need to come through, and at the same time provide that level of security to keep the undesirable aspects out. So that brings us to the fact that, for the most part, border security is a political issue, not a practical one. Okay? It is something that is debated by policymakers and politicians, because in a practical sense, as we're going to see here in a minute, it's almost not worth talking about. Okay? So let's look at two borders here in the United States. The most famous or infamous border when it comes to the immigration issue would be the United States southern border, stretching from California through Texas, almost 2,000 miles long, 1,954 miles. According to Customs and Border Protection, only 744 miles of that border is at what they consider to be an acceptable level of control. Okay? 744 miles. CBP has the capability to, quote, deter or detect and apprehend illegal entries at the immediate border for only 129 miles, most of which is in California. So over a 2,000 mile span, we're talking about 129 miles that Customs and Border Protection could actually apprehend someone as they cross the border. Okay? It's a ridiculously small percentage. All right? So what Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Border Patrol have done is they have adopted what they call an acceptable level of control, or the elastic border concept, where basically they will detect people as they cross the border and then hopefully apprehend them before they get more than 100 miles inland. That's the elastic border concept. And the reality is there's not enough fence, there's not enough money to build fence, there's not enough technology, there's not enough drones, there's not enough officers to patrol that border to ever really be able to expand it much beyond that 129 miles of immediate apprehension capability or 744 miles of acceptable level of control. There's not enough money. You aren't willing to pay it. The government's not willing to pay it, and money just doesn't come from anywhere. So we have to balance that out. The northern border, 4,000 miles long between the United States and Canada. We don't put as much money into that, mainly because 99% of the illegal crossings happen on the southern border, not at the northern border. And only 32 miles of 4,000 is at what DHS calls their acceptable level of control. Everything else is pretty much wide open. Depends upon state and local law enforcement to patrol the border, but for the most part, it's not patrolled at all. Okay? So, that emphasizes more than anything the fact that this is a political discussion and a political desire, and has actually nothing to do with the actual security of the United States. If someone wants to walk into the U.S., you go to Canada and you walk across the border. It's that simple. Okay? So when we're talking about vectors of terrorism and other things that directly impact the security of the homeland, okay, we can't talk about border security as an effective way to do that, because for the most part, our borders are wide open. Not to mention the fact that the hundreds and thousands of miles, hundreds or thousands of miles, of unpatrolled waterways along the oceans that are for all intents and purposes, wide open. So I want you to remember that. This is a political discussion, okay? One born in Washington and in state capitals, and has absolutely nothing to do with actual security in the United States, okay? All right. All right, so just one last summary, and I'll leave most of the facts and figures there in the PowerPoint. You need to really focus on the three paths of immigration that come in, as far as family-based, employment-based, and then refugees and asylees are your three paths of immigration. And understand how those worked and how the quotas work. And really, I want you to look at those numbers and start to think about what that actually means. Okay, and we'll talk about this in homework next week, in week 12. I really want to think about, once you thinking about, does it matter that we let X amount in versus Y? Is more or less. How does that impact, how does the policies that set these quotas, how does that impact job security and unemployment here in the United States, if it does? All right. So that's what I've got for you for the video this week. Really remember, when we talk about border security, we're talking politics, not practicality. And you need to understand really the scope, not only of the size of the border, but how small the immigration problem or non-problem, however you may see it, is. So that's what I've got for you this week. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.